I personally didn't have 1,000 students, but my company did.
No, I get you.
And that's where I am now. Is I wrote a book on it, and I use animals like you had hinted at before, and everyone has a specific animal personality type. But the most important thing is it really focuses on what are our core values, and at least accepting that we have different core values,
Mhm.
and understanding those things helps us get along better.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our mission is to help you live your best audacious life ever. I'm totally thrilled to have you here with us today, and I truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join us. Each episode is designed to inspire, empower, and motivate you to embrace your uniqueness, confront challenges head on, and foster meaningful relationships. Together, we'll explore how to cultivate self-awareness, understand our core values, and navigate the intricate dynamics of our personalities. Now, imagine a vibrant garden where each plant represents a different personality type, each with its own core values. Some plants thrive in sunlight, while others flourish in the shade. Just as these plants require specific conditions to grow, we too need an environment that respects and nurtures our individual differences. Understanding our values, as well as those of others, allows us to cultivate a harmonious garden full of relationships. Now, when we recognize and appreciate these differences, we create a thriving ecosystem of support, growth, and connection, which is essential for personal development and successful interactions. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Eric G. He's a talented screenwriter and founder of an innovative education company focused on personality types and personal growth. With a passion for helping individuals discover their true selves, Eric has a unique methodology that combines core values, personality insights, and animal dynamics to empower people in their personal and professional lives. He's also the author of the book, The Power of Personality, which he delves into these themes in great depth. His insights are incredibly relevant to today's episode as we discuss the profound impact that understanding our core values and personality types can have on our personal growth and relationship dynamics. Eric's experience in education and his unique approach to personality types provide a fresh perspective that can help listeners navigate their interactions and with great self-awareness and acceptance. So now that we've got you all set, let's turn to our conversation with Eric. Enjoy. Hey, Eric, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. I mean, it's like 3 a.m. in California, Los Angeles, right? And we're here chatting. So thank you for doing this. It's super duper awesome, man. You can be here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I know it's 6 a.m. where you're at, so I know you're up and early, and I'm kind of like just holding out to the rest of my night. This is the end of my night, but I got energy. I'm ready to go.
Well, look, yeah, energy is a big thing here. And again, we enjoy just on this podcast, really engaging in dialogues that really are centered around helping individuals live that best audacious life that we talk about here. And, an important aspect of living that life is understanding that the journey that we're all on our own individual path, our own individual journey, and we're going to see our own set of obstacles, pitfalls, what have you. And it's really just, our responsibility is the word I was searching for. Our responsibility to continue through these challenges, to get to the other side, if you will. And something that, as a life coach and you're an author, you spend a lot of time focusing on personalities and the power of personalities. And I think that's really, really fitting sort of within the context of what we're talking about on this podcast, because understanding yourself and understanding, others around you is important for our individual success. We're not on this planet by ourselves. Relationships and how we manage them are going to be key to our success. And so maybe as a starting point, and then you've got the little animal. I'm going to put that drop that little hint there for our listeners. You got a little animal dynamic that you include in yours also. So maybe for our listeners, Eric, I'll open up the floor. If you can tell us, our audience, a little bit about yourself, what you do, and the work that's brought you to the point that you're at now.
I started off as a screenwriter, or at least a amateur screenwriter. That's what my academic background
Okay.
was. And, I just started writing and, they focused on characters, but I veered off towards starting my own education company. And you might ask, what do writing and like learning about like, or educating people have in common? And I really found that I got a lot of enjoyment out of helping people discover themselves. And I think writing is a part of that too, right? We're always trying to find our own voice. How do we
Yeah.
express ourselves? Same thing, right? And I found like in life, it was super satisfying when, you see students like kind of trying to live other people's values. I found like with my own life, like I was kind of, when I was younger, I was like kind of like maybe trying to adjust to other people's values when in fact, maybe I had different ones, right?
Yeah.
And so I started my own education company. I had a huge focus on that. I would try to teach my teachers how
Yeah.
to understand the personality types of their students and also understand their own personality types because we got to understand our own bias, right? Otherwise, we won't
Yeah.
know when we're pushing it on other people. And then that's how I came up with my own methodology. And, I had about 1,000 students a year. So got a lot of
Beautiful.
practice. I personally didn't have 1,000 students, but my company did.
No, I get you.
And yeah, and that's where I am now is like, I wrote a book on it and I use animals like you had hinted at before. And everyone has a specific animal personality type. But the most important thing is it really focuses on what are our core values and at least accepting that we have different core values,
Mhm.
and understanding those things helps us get along better.
I very much appreciate the approach to education in that there's an emphasis really on understanding of self and then those around and then how self and us and others around us can intermingle and coexist. Um, Takes a bit more time. That's a bit of a longer process, but I think the outcomes are outstanding when you can do that.
Right. I think, I always just try to look at it like if you try to teach your students everything then
Hmm.
you're limiting them, right? Because you're limiting them to everything that you know. But, obviously the future, like future students of technology and all those kinds of things, and they have a lot more within them and a greater potential to learn. So really, it's my job to teach them, to get them on the right path to where they're pursuing something they truly love and
Hmm.
value. And then, sky's the limit, right? But if I just try to
Gotcha.
teach them what I know, I'm limiting them because I'm
Mm.
only this one person, right?
Right, and you're assuming that that's all that they need to know, right? So
Right.
I think that's a good point, limiting them in their learning. Let's jump into the power of the personality, which is your book. I wonder if you expand on that just a little bit and help our audience understand, what you were looking to achieve and maybe why you did it. So you had your education company, and did you see the connection? Is that
Mm.
what drew you to it, or how did that come to be?
I think it's because this is going to get really wonky, right? But like the way the personality types break down, I tend to break people down into four different large categories. I call them packs,
Okay.
because I use animal types, right? And one of those packs makes up about half the population. So what I started seeing is that a large percentage of people fall into one thing, which is fantastic. And,
Mhm.
they have a specific value, which is safety and security. So that's the reason why we have civilization. We have
Right.
strong social structures, but they also, because of that value, they tend to be teachers a lot,
Right.
oftentimes, right? Like, so let's say they make up 50% of the population, they may make up like 70 to 75% of teachers, especially grade school teachers.
Okay.
And so what I realized is like, their values and that system gets really pushed on kids. And I personally didn't fit into one of those personality types or I wouldn't fit into that pack. So I felt a lot of pressure when growing up, as I mentioned before. So
Mhm.
my goal really was to teach people like, that's great. We can value that thing, but also know that half the population doesn't. And there's all these different kinds of personalities. And really, when we look around us, there are people who wake up at 5 a.m., right? Or some people wake up at midnight and work the graveyard shift. We all have different ways of living our lives. And
Yeah.
I think the closer we get to accepting that and knowing that there's nothing weird about us, I think we can become happier, right?
Okay. 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 And so then, so you made that connection. You said, okay, I see a book here. How that comes to be.
That was really random, actually. I was actually writing screenplays. So I had shuttered my education company because I wanted to go back to writing and do the creative thing. And I was writing screenplays and pilots, and I joined this writing group. And, every like Tuesday, after we'd write, there's a group of us, right? We'd go to the bar and just kind of like drink and talk, And I had mentioned the personality types, and, I use animals. So someone said, "What animal am I? What animal?" I'm like, "I think you're a panda." and I start explaining it, and people get really excited and are like, oh, let me take this test that you have online. And everyone started figuring out what animal type they were. And like, they said, what's like, and they read their description and got really excited about it. And a friend of mine was like, hey, like, you should really write a book on this. And, I was like, no, I'm going to continue writing my pilots that will probably never get sold because they're about like sex addicted rabbits. Right.
Right.
And I have something with animals apparently. And so what ended up happening was she introduced it to the writer's room that she was working on, and she put it into one of the episodes of Mythic Quest. She was writing on this show called Mythic Quest, which is on Apple TV, and she wrote it into one of her episodes. And I was like, oh gosh, like if it's good enough to at least be featured in one episode, then I should write a book. And so I wrote a book and pitched it that way. Like I said, as featured on Apple TV's Mythic Quest, and was able to get an agent and a publisher and enough people interested. And hopefully, more people come to know the methodology, and hopefully it'll have a positive impact on their life.
Sure. Okay, so let's dive into it a little bit, if you don't mind. You said there are animals. How many different types of animals, and perhaps can you give us a few that might people can maybe connect or resonate with?
Yeah. There's 16 different animals. And I know a lot of times people are like, oh, MBTI, because, if you know enough about personality theories, like that's one of them, and it has 16 types as well. But my diagnostic methodology is way different. So
Okay.
that's the disclaimer I always put, is like, no, it's very, very different, even though there's 16 animals. The one that I always say, like, because if you tell someone they're a fox, I think people understand what that personality is, right? They're like, oh, okay. And a lot of people want to be foxes, because they're like, oh, they're cool and they're like sly, and then you tell them, oh, like a fox is like James Bond, right? Or Han Solo, they're like that roguish, crafty, shrewd, maybe
Right.
not necessarily the most strategic, or maybe they're not the most patient. They're not the most organized and structured, but that you definitely want them if you want to make a football team. They're your best kind of quarterback, because they're the ones you adjust, modify, and kind of look at a situation
Yeah.
and do the best in that situation, right?
What's interesting is that it almost sounds, and we only just talked about the fox here, but it almost sounds like people will hear an animal, oh yeah, I want to be that. But at the same time, there are some areas of so the strength areas for sure. But other areas where, not so much, right? So you, for example, the fox maybe aren't the best planners, as an example,
Mhm.
right? And I think it's just funny. So when you have these animals, everyone dives to the stuff that they know and they love, but they
Right.
don't sort of see the other side. And I think the other side is equally as important, because the other side gives you a starting point of where areas you can improve in your own self.
Yeah, I actually, this is gonna sound terrible, but I love focusing on the negative, because, like you said, anytime you say positive things about people, of course they're gonna say yes, right? Like if you say, oh yeah, your personality type is like prone to being good at sports. And, even though they're not, they'll be like, oh yeah, they're gonna like think back to when they were like 11 and they were the worst player on their soccer team. But they're like, oh yeah, I played fullback on my soccer team and da da da. You're always gonna like have that confirmation vibe. It's positive.
Yeah.
But if you say negative traits, people will only claim them if they are true, right? Like they'll be like, oh yeah, I guess that's right. I am like that. That probably is me, versus if it is not true, then they're definitely not going to say, yeah, that's me. I'm irresponsible, right? People are like, no, I'm not irresponsible. I'm like, call me rigid. Call me,
Right.
but don't
Right.
call me irresponsible.
Mhm.
And you're right, like that's where we build from. So I'm always a big believer in strengths come from weaknesses, right? For every
Yeah.
person's really structured, organized person, they might also be a fascist. Like they might have like that negative trait. And for every
Sure.
person who's like really cool and spontaneous, they might be a bit flaky.
Right.
So
And so, and you're right. There are two sides to every coin, and it's really what people want to be. I think if you're being honest with yourself, right? What you choose to embrace is important. And so, how about a spider? A spider is one of those on the list of the 16. What can you tell us about
Mhm. Ooh, spider. That's an interesting one. Not a lot of people ask about the spider. You must have a spider in your life, because you like, I don't know, like they're the strategist. So, the funny thing is, if you're watching any movie, generally like the criminal masterminds are
that?
generally spiders. Like
Okay.
they're very like fastidious. They have contingency plans. I mean, by the way, I'm not saying that spiders are bad guys and evil
No,
masterminds. I'm just saying sometimes we perceive that
that's
in
right.
pop culture. But yeah, a spider is basically, a lot of software engineers are spiders, because spiders are all, the best description of a spider is they will work very, very hard to create systems of efficiency so that
Yes.
they can be lazy. Like they like creating systems so that people don't have to put, especially themselves, don't have to put
Right.
that much work in.
Right.
And that's
Right.
probably the best description of them.
Dolphins. Dolphins are friendly. Everyone likes dolphins. They're cute and they do nice tricks and they're happy. What can you tell us
Hmm.
about dolphins?
And dolphins are like that. They're very popular. And a lot of podcast hosts that I've been talking to, in terms of like anyone who's doing like self-awareness podcasts,
Yeah.
often are dolphins because dolphins value self-knowledge, not only for themselves, discovering themselves, but also helping other people discover
Mm,
themselves. They're great at building communities like that. They'll always try to look for growth for each individual. Dolphins tend to be pretty good leaders or in leadership positions, but the way they lead is not necessarily from the front. They might lead from behind,
mhm.
and they might focus on each individual and making sure that each individual is heard, and then they bring everything together at the end. But they're definitely not the person who's like in the front saying, "No, do this, do this, do this."
Got you.
Um,
Got you.
that's definitely another type of leader. So.
Could it perhaps be the owl that does that?
The owl is super, I would say, down. I didn't want to say soft. I was going to say soft. They're just very quiet. The
Right.
best owl is Einstein.
Okay.
Einstein is a great example of an owl, and not to say that if you're an owl, then you're going to be a genius like Einstein.
Listen, that's what people are jumping on. When I say
Yeah.
owl, that's because I want to be smart.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're like, oh yeah, yeah. I'm an owl. Trust me. I have a friend who's an owl, and he's like, you know what? Everyone thinks we're supposed to be geniuses. We just like information, and we're really nerdy. And he's like, I know about two things, a lot about two things: fantasy football and massage, because that's what I'm into.
Okay.
And everything else, I don't know much about. It's not like every owl is Einstein. They just like information. So.
Got you. I don't know. You got another neat one for us here? I'm just like 16. What else you got?
Yeah, like sharks. Sharks are really common. They're the typical action hero, and I know,
Mm,
like they're very action oriented. Like when you think of or like Michael Jordan as a shark, someone who like they're very specific, very narrow focus. They're not always the best students in school, in like
okay.
traditional school, but if
Okay.
you give them a tool, they'll practice it over and over again to master it. And that tool can be anything. Obviously, Michael Jordan would be a basketball or a golf club, right? But it doesn't have to be sport. It could be like, like a craftsman, like
Got you.
I don't know, like a carpenter. So
Got you. Okay.
yeah.
Now, I maybe we'll come back to the animals later, but I just want to I want to, something certainly want to ask about is um, the possibility of us being a blend of maybe different animals, right? Like,
Mhm.
our personalities, we're not all just one thing all the time. Sometimes we're layered as individuals and we have other things that come in to feed who we are. And that's what makes us so unique and individualized. How does that factor into your personality profiles?
I like to separate the two, like the way like our personality is versus our experiences,
Hmm.
because I like to say that our personality types, our experiences don't dictate our personality type. Our personality type dictates how we respond to our experiences,
Got you.
right? And that's just because I don't want to feel like I never want to feel like people are being put into boxes, right? Or people shouldn't feel like they're being put into boxes. But I also don't want people to go, oh, I am like a hodgepodge of all the different people in my lives and the
Mm,
culture that I come from. Oftentimes that works in the negative, right? Like, let's say you're a peacock, and I bet you can imagine what a peacock acts like. They're
sure.
very, vivacious and like to dance, and they're very expressive. But if you're a peacock and you grow up in a traditional Japanese household in Japan, that the culture itself does not lend itself to being particularly supportive of
Mm,
outward uh, feelings of emotion or expressions of emotion. They're not really into physical contact, and peacocks are always hugging people. So I think people are not necessarily combinations of things, but they're influenced by their surroundings, but they're generally going to have that same core personality. And I always say people don't change, but we grow. So
got you.
yeah, puppies don't grow into kittens, or puppies don't grow into cats, they grow into dogs.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
always about like figuring out who you are so you can grow into the best version of yourself, because it's very easy for you to grow into a worse version of yourself as well.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. It can go both ways. And
hmm
it's funny because as you're talking, I'm thinking about, okay, so are we saying that, personalities or maybe the personality types, can they change over time as they evolve and gain insights, knowledge, and experiences?
I think I think it's what seems like change is
Uh-huh.
more us gaining more insight into ourselves and realizing, oh, my parents always told me I was this. And so I just believed it and I just acted that way. And then now I'm 40 though, and I'm really thinking about it. And I'm like, no, actually, I prefer this. And so it's kind of cool, right? Like it teaches us that we should constantly be trying to find out more about people, because I'm always saying like, yeah, it's okay to think, oh, this person is a shark. But let's say you find out more information about them and it starts like coloring the way you see them. Then you can, oh, maybe they aren't a shark. Maybe there's something else. So I feel like it's like ideally creates lifelong learners when it comes to the people around in our lives. And it just encourages us to always like see and observe them and
Yeah.
figure out about them. And then, like our opinions of them might change.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Now, Eric, people are going to be familiar with personality types. That's not a thing that's anything new. We've done them before. We've seen the Myers-Briggs types of the world and the others that exist. Is it how does yours connect, relate? Is it better than? I mean, I don't want to it's not about making a comparison, but certainly that people understand where this fits into the grand scheme of things.
Well, I don't mind making a comparison. I think it's better.
Okay, sure. I open the doors to come on in.
Yeah, I'm gonna run on in. And I mean, the big thing for me is like something like extroversion and introversion. I've been talking about that a lot because that comes into play. People like have books on it just specifically on introversion, right? And I think I won't say it's a myth, but it's an oversimplification because it only is valid like for half the population, right? Because if you're that majority pack, extroversion, introversion tends to make sense and those people are more plentiful, and those people tend to also like to volunteer. So back like 100 years ago when they were doing these observational studies, I think they saw people like that volunteering, and so it became like the popular notion, right? But mine doesn't do any of that. I don't use extroversion, introversion to I won't say diagnose, but to categorize people. I always go based on value. So I think a lot of the complaints I've got in the past about this is like people are like, well, this is so dumb because I'm introverted in this situation and I'm extroverted in this situation. I'm like, yeah, I understand because it's based on context, right? Like if it's something you really value, then you are going to be a little bit more aggressive and maybe outgoing. And if it's something that you don't care much about, then you'll kind of be more passive and deferential. So
I wonder if you could expand on the importance of values. I mean, this is your this personality methodology, if you will, places an emphasis on values, and values are important to us. Values shape and frame a lot of things for us. I wonder if you could talk about the significance of values into this overall.
Yeah, like I said, half the population, their core value is safety and security. But then let's say a third of the population falls into another pack and their value is excitement. So you can imagine when this person values safety and security and this person values like visceral excitement, that they're going to clash a little bit, right? Like it's you ask like the person who values excitement why you want to go on a roller coaster. They're like, I love it because I feel like I'm getting thrown around and that I might die. Like that's exciting. And then the person who values safety and security is gonna be like, what are you talking about? Like that's the exact feeling I do not want. I do not want to feel like I'm gonna die. I want to feel like I'm safe. And that's the most common. Those are the two most common packs. So when you think of like the odd couple, that's kind of that dichotomy, right? Or Bert and Ernie, right?
Yeah.
Bert is like the safe and secure. Ernie is like the wild guy, Right. And so those are two different kinds of values. And I think we can accept that both of those things have value in society. We just need to accept that and stop trying to like change people and trying to make them like I as a student, I was constantly given an organizer by my teachers every year in grade school, and I'm just like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. This is the year that I'm going to write my homework down and every day. And it would take me about 3 days. And then I just start shoving my homework in my backpack because I don't, because that was me, so yeah. That's the reality of it.
Right. Okay. So we've gone through the book. We've identified our personalities. We know which animal we are, whether we like it or not. That's our animal. Now what?
Well, you can use it in a lot of different ways. I think the number one thing I'm always asked is like, who should I hook up with? Like who's my soulmate? I mean, like that. And that's a good, by the way, I'm not disclaiming that. I would just say that I don't believe in soulmates in that way. Like I do think, but it is a really good way of understanding that if you're like, let's say a shark and, you're going out with a fox, then you're going to have a certain amount of conflict and it's going to be pretty consistent based on your personality types. And you got to be okay with that, right? If you're not okay with it, then you probably shouldn't be in that relationship, right? Because then you're going to be trying to like change them. And I don't think that's really good. But the positive things will also be good. If you're a fox and you're with a peacock, you're going to have a lot of fun. Let me tell you, like, that's like one of those like burn hot and fast relationships, but if you're a fox peacock relationship, don't be surprised when your, significant other's eyes waver, and kind of start wandering around when you're at a bar because your eyes are going to wander too, So that's just, the nature of those two types. And I think when you know your personality, it can help you in that. It can help you like maybe find a career that
Hmm.
might be more likable. Especially if you hate your career now, you can definitely like maybe go towards one that you might like a
Sure.
bit more. And I think the number one thing that actually I got a lot of, or I get a lot of, is parents who have children, or people just trying to understand their relationship with their parents. I think
Right.
that's the best one because, like that obviously is like a very important relationship and it really shapes us,
Yes.
for either good or bad. And I think that's like probably the most vital one is understanding your children or your parents and like
Yeah.
how you're different and how, your differences impact them.
I also appreciate, even from a personal development standpoint, how understanding what your animal is can help you identify your areas of improvement or your areas where you can build up. But at the same time, knowing what your strengths are too, and I am a big fan of leaning into strengths, right? Particularly when
Mhm.
let's say you're going through a challenge or period of adversity or some kind of struggle, leaning into that strength, that thing that you do, that thing that you like, that thing that motivates you, that you have energy for, leaning into in those instances isn't a bad thing. Actually, it's a very, very good thing because at the very least, yes, this is a horrible, challenging, difficult thing, but I can get my strength and energy over here, right? And so
Mhm.
I think that's another thing that's really, really important.
Yeah, it's like, I used to coach basketball and I played a lot of basketball. So I always have like sports metaphors. There's a lot of
Sure.
sports references in the
They're
book.
welcome. They're welcome here,
Yeah.
believe me.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Like I reference like Kobe Bryant and Robert Ory many times in the book. And I'm always thinking, when I used to play too, like I like to post up, which often surprises people because I'm not very tall, but I'll post up anybody. I don't care how tall you are. And, it's one of those things where, yeah, that's your comfort zone, right? And you do it. It doesn't mean that you don't try different things. Maybe try to like shoot from the outside or maybe try more drives to the basket, right? But when it push comes to shove, like, and you need a bucket, you're gonna go to your comfort zone, right? Where you're like, okay, I got to
Mm,
go here now, because this is important. And I think that's a lot to having to do with personality too. It's like knowing what your anchor is really important. That way you don't forget that anchor. And then once you have that anchor and you know what you are and what you're good at, then you can like experiment and like go, hey, this type tends to do this better. Like personally, I'm not really great with my taxes because I'm not particularly structured, and I don't like to do things that I find are boring. So, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't do my taxes. So maybe I can borrow some of the things and
sure.
methods that other types use to do the things that I'm not particularly good at. Um,
I,
so
I do. Yeah, no, I think that's great. The other part that I find a deep appreciation for is the whole idea of truly knowing who you are. And this helps you do that. And because if we're going to move through society, certainly knowing who we are and living that, living our truth, living who we are, being authentic to our core individual, which is, of course, you mentioned tied into our values. And so I think that's a really, really key theme in all of those. Because again, if I take it back to this podcast, when we talk about living audaciously, well, living audaciously can't happen if I got no idea what drives me, motivates me, gets me up in
mhm.
the morning to do great things. And so I think that's a key aspect of how it can impact knowing ourselves, the key aspect of knowing, how big and broad and spectacular our lives can be.
Yeah, I think, and you're right. Like audaciousness is all about like having confidence in yourself, right? And if you're at a point where people are constantly telling you, especially kids, right? I work with a lot of kids, and
Yep.
you're being told like, "Oh no, whatever you're doing is wrong." Then it's really hard to live with any confidence. And then how do you build that up? It's so funny with I find that when I reach students who have their parents are different personalities than them, and they might be a minority type of personality type.
Sure.
And all it takes is just that little nudge and just saying, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with you. You're okay. What you love and what you like to do, that's cool. Pursue that." And then they just like, go off, and then like it's surprising how like soon it or how quick it clicks, and it's pretty satisfying.
I love it. So I gotta ask. I mean, maybe we'll get a couple other animals, but I gotta ask what yours is first. What's your animal?
I am a baboon.
A baboon. Okay.
Yeah, and it's not the most attractive animal. A lot of people like, oh, like a baboon. Oh, I'm like, hey, so that's why, like, don't complain. If people get an animal, they don't like their animal, don't complain because, mine isn't particularly great, right? Like people are like, I don't want to be this. I'm like, hey, I'm a baboon. Baboons like show their butts to people most of the time. That's kind of what they're known for. But yeah, so I'm part of a pack. It's a minority pack I call them shamans.
Okay.
And it's the same pack as the dolphin I had mentioned earlier. Their core value is self-knowledge. And so baboons' core value is also self-knowledge. So instead of safety and security or excitement, we seek like finding out about ourselves and helping others do that as well. But as opposed to the dolphin, who tends to be much more communal and like about bringing people together, the baboon is more about like being loud and advocating and being a voice to their ideas, like these are like what I find is important. Like if anyone's seen like the movie Dead Poet Society, I referenced that in the book. Robin Williams' character is a baboon. Like he's just very like, this is what I believe in, kids, you're gonna listen to it and hear it and listen to me preach,
Right.
And I think sometimes people might view that as being extroverted, but that's the problem that I have with that terminology, because they'll also think of the person who does body shots in Cabo on a bar as being extroverted. Those are two different things. Preaching in front of, people and going and doing body shots, two different types of personalities, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I love it. Eric, this was fantastic. I really appreciate the insights on these personality types that you created. I think the animals add an interesting dynamic to it, and I think you'll get people's attention because everyone wants to know what animal is I, and you've probably experienced that. For listeners who want to learn more about you, get your book, or even take the personality test themselves, where can we send them?
You can go to utopiaproject.com, and I always say it's YOU, like YouTube. So utopiaproject.com. And there's actually a test on the website, even though I always put the disclaimer that tests are always cookie cutter. I mean, I do like my test, but at the very least, once you get your description, if it doesn't match, maybe look at some of the other animal types and maybe those match better. Or you could have a friend take the test for you, because that often works too. Because sometimes we don't even know ourselves, and we might take the test with a little bit of wishful thinking, and so sometimes it helps for other people. So that's the best way to find me, is on utopiaproject.com. Or if you flip it around, my life coaching site is projectutopia.com.
Okay. And
people are like, why do you have two sites? It's like, well, they're just different. One's a WordPress site and one's not. So
Fair. Well, that's great. We're going to make sure the appropriate contact details are available in the show notes as well. Eric, awesome. I said, this has been awesome. Thank you for doing this. It's had a blast running through this, and I appreciate you for being on the Audacious Living Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I guess spending the late night with me and morning with you. So
awesome. Back we are here on the podcast. During our chat with Eric, one of the main points that resonated with me was the importance of recognizing and accepting our individual core values and those of others. Eric emphasized that many of us often feel pressure to conform to the dominant values around us, which can lead to confusion and dissatisfaction. He illustrated how understanding our personality types can serve as a compass, guiding us towards more fulfilling relationships and choices. I personally loved how Eric highlighted that embracing our differences rather than trying to fit into a mold is the key to unlocking our potential and achieving genuine happiness. Now, if you found Eric's insights of value as I did, I'd encourage you to connect with him directly. You can find all the contact details in the show notes below. Obviously his website, where you can explore more of his work and take his personality tests, and he really, really is insightful. Eric's also offering a special opportunity for listeners by simply visiting the site. You can access exclusive resources that are connected to his book, The Power of Positivity, and learn more about his unique coaching approach. I'd encourage you to do so, and don't miss an opportunity to deepen your understanding of yourself and others. I really want to thank you for being here on the Audacious Living Podcast. I really hope that you found today's discussion with Eric as enlightening as I did, and I encourage you, if you haven't already done so, please like, follow, subscribe, and share this content with others who you think would benefit from this conversation. This is the kind of support that helps us grow and reach even more listeners who are on the path of living an audacious life. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.